This is study number 1 from Fernando Sor's Op.60. Op.60 is 25 kind of progressive studies, so they start off a little bit easier and progress to more advanced ones. Follow the lesson for free as always and pick up a whole bunch of tips even if you're not playing the piece. But if you are interested, I do have an edition of all 25 of Op.60 studies. So for this study, certainly this one starts on the easier side, and the notation is quite simplistic, or at least it looks quite simplistic. But we can talk about a couple of things. We can talk about the time signature, and we can talk about the phrasing, a little bit about sustaining the notes, and a couple comments about possible right hand fingering. I tend to feel this piece in cut time instead of common time, so instead of 1, 2, 3, 4. More just like 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. However you feel it, just try to glide through the bar as legato as possible. A little bit of emphasis on the first and third beat, or if you're in cut time, then first and second. But nevertheless, just gliding through the bar quite easily. Most of the phrasing in this piece, as with the rest of Op.60, is pretty symmetrical phrasing, 4-bar phrases. So you're just trying to really create a nice arch from start to finish every 4 bars, essentially. And you can always hear the thematic start and end to the phrase. So for example, and again. So nice symmetrical 4-bar phrases. And then just be a little bit careful about sustain. Although the notation is very one note at a time, it looks very simplistic. There is bass and treble voices kind of implied and some arpeggios. So for example, at bar 9, you don't want to play it like this, like one note at a time. But instead, by sustaining the notes, you can create some harmony. So keeping your fingers down and letting the notes sustain a little bit to create some chords, especially within the half note beat, but even sometimes within the full bar. You don't have to worry about it too much. Just make sure you're not playing it like one note at a time. You really want to connect as much as possible. And then in terms of the right hand fingering, my score has lots of left-hand fingering, but no right-hand fingering because the original doesn't. But I'll be covering some of the right-hand fingering in these lessons. Nevertheless, though, most of the time, like if you've done your scales and arpeggios, you're alternating your fingers on the top voice and using your thumb on the lower voices. It's pretty straightforward alternation work. But let's talk about this one. I've seen some people very successfully play this piece pretty much just with IM alternation. And just play through the awkward string crossings, which makes for a really good exercise in alternating our fingers, and we should be able to do that. I do throw in the A finger occasionally to just set up the awkward string crossings when it's convenient to do so. So for example, I don't want to think about it all the time, but in a few select places, like the very beginning of the piece, you can throw it in to effect. So I go A, M, I, A, M, I, because it's convenient to do that in the first 2 bars because of those 3-note figures across the strings. When you get to bar 3, though, you then just start alternating IM and just play through it. So it's kind of like you select your right-hand fingering, your special right-hand fingering, and then you apply a concept to the majority of the rest of it. So A, M, I, A, M, I, then just alternate I and M. And then I use my thumb on the bass strings, except for that chord there at the end. And then at bar 9, because whenever you have large skips between the strings, I throw in A finger, so A, I, A, M, A, I. So whenever you're playing across like the first string and then you're playing the third string, or vice versa, it's convenient to play with A and I there because they're just closer to those strings. That's very ergonomic fingering. So it works here. So bar 9, A, I, sorry, A, I, A, M, A, I, M, A, M, I. And then, you know, then thumb on the bass strings. Thumb, 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 thumb. As long as you're alternating your fingering, you can use any fingering you want. As you know, you just want to smoothly play through the piece with alternating fingers, not repeating fingers all the time. Those are some possible suggestions. As we progress through other ones, I'll be talking about that more. But in general, you're alternating fingers whenever you can, and then a few occasional spots if the strings are jumping between outer strings, and you can use A on the top string just to break it up a little bit. So I hope that helped, and then I'll be making lessons for all 25 of these studies.